people don't really give restoration contractors the credit they deserve. They are the ones that run around and clean up, fix up, repair after major catastrophes. And without that, industries, whole economies can collapse at the governmental level.
They're kind of blind to maybe the fact that the contractor is the work, like the work of the contractor equals the claim.
Shit rolls downhill, and the restorer is at the bottom of that hill.
I still hope that like Canada insurance market and Australia insurance market does not become the reality of the U.S. insurance market in the property space. And I know that if it happens, restorers will adapt, and I will be there to support restorers, and I'm still pro restorer, right? But I also think that we have to work together in the ecosystem.
Why do you think AIG and State Farm and Farmers and Nationwide and Serve Pro and Liberty to the best of their ability is pulling out of California? Why do you think that is? You think there's money to be made? No. Of course not. They're not making money.
The system's broken.
Yeah, it's totally broken.
Well, welcome everyone to the Albi After Hours podcast, where we talk about all things propelling restoration forward. My name is Alex Duda, and today I've got the man, the myth, the legend. He does not have a first and last name. He just goes by Whatley, and his catchphrase is, "What up, playa?" What up, playa? How's it going?
Do I say that?
Yeah.
I do say that.
Yeah. You might want to put the mic closer, you know. It's not a surety mic, but... you know.
Oh, it's a Shure mic.
Yeah.
And these are the good ones. These are even better than the S7s.
Yeah, man.
So hopefully we're coming through clear.
Yeah. So welcome to our podcast here. What do you know about propelling restoration forward?
I know that's what Albi is setting out to do and is doing.
Okay.
And I suppose it's something I think the both of us think a lot about. Being fellow restorers, we saw problems and things that could be improved. And I think that we've been busy beavering away on actually solving them, not being okay with the status quo.
Interesting. So I've been following you since 2016, back in Rome Exterra days. We actually kind of bonded over this back when your profile pic was this animated, and you guys could throw it up, but it was like this animated little, I guess, painting or animation.
It was like an illustration.
An AI generation illustration.
It was pre-AI. That was actually done by a human.
Oh, super cool. Yeah, with the purple background and then your face. And you didn't go by Mark Whatley. No, you were Whatley, right?
Yeah.
And then you were going in here and started this thing, Actionable Insights at the time. And I remember using the data sheets and stuff like that. You were all over the groups. You created Xactimate Ninjas over on Facebook. That was super cool. But I never knew much about you, right? Other than you're the cool guy that trained my competitors. And when, I was able to steal Vinny, and we actually did an episode with Vinny on how he writes $15 million of mitigation work in a year, but that's thanks to you. But yeah, where did this all start? Like, how'd you get in restoration? I think our audience must know that because you're a little mysterious about that. And then, like, has that evolved into what you do today and the different brands you're a part of and the different problems that you're solving for restorers?
I was a PE guy out of college. I did a short stint at the largest private equity firm in San Diego. That firm actually shut down, and as it did, I was well rewarded for my efforts, and I had a few bucks in my pocket. We were just coming out of the 2008 financial crisis, which was not a fun time to be in financial service for obvious reasons. And so I was really sensitive to, an industry, really interested by an industry that would be really buoyant in a down economy, because I had just been through that deep and sharp pain of a really turbulent financial market, and had a few bucks in my pocket. I'm like, okay, what do I know how to do, and what would be buoyant in a down economy? And so all through high school, going back to like age 12, man, I was doing abatement with no PPEs, taking out asbestos, like 12 years old, like just wild stuff.
Parents
that was totally
were in the trades, or
no,
friend, uncle?
My pops was like flipping houses, so there was some exposure there. But I worked for 2 large general contractors in college, or actually in high school.
Oh wow!
And I was doing a lot of ADA expansion stuff, American Disabilities Act. So we were doing ramps like out at bungalows for elementary schools. That was like a lot of the work I did for years. So I'd run a small crew of 4, which was weird because I was like 19 and I'm like running around people that are in their 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s. But somehow I knew how to do math, and so that qualified me. a rise and run calculation to run the crew. So did that. But anyhow, after the PE stint, I rather pragmatically selected for this industry because of those characteristics of being buoyant in a down economy.
Yep.
And then I knew how to build. And I was like, okay, I know how to build, got just enough to pull this off. And so I threw in with a friend of my dad's who had a janitorial company that was doing $280,000 a year top line. And he got this one insurance claim. And I remember it being the economics were hung up with this insurance claim with a mortgage company, no less. We'll get back to that.
Oh, wow. And this was what, 08, 09?
This is 2010.
Got it.
And so 2010, running around, I'm like, all right. It started out perhaps as like consulting for my buddy's dad to like get his business straight.
Yep.
Because I was just recently like out of a job because the whole damn firm shut down. And then I was like, wow, like the margins on this job are excellent because I was like getting the finances together comparative to janitorial work, right? And so they were doing some rug sucking too, but it was primarily commercial janitorial. And I came to him with this like brand strategy, and it was keep it clean janitorial. And then I was like, what if we do KIC restoration? And so I presented it to him, and he dug it. And then ultimately I was taking like a commission out of the work that I was winning. And so I put my wife on the search engine optimization. That was my first fishing hole, as you recommend, right?
Yep.
Out of Restoration Millionaire, is go get that PPC, get that organic SEO going. And we did. And I started driving revenue, and I was supposed to take 12%, I think, of the what I won, like as an outside consultant. This did not last for long because like we were growing so fast that there wasn't cash flow enough to like pay me because we were growing at, I don't know, at that time, I think year one with me involved in the business, just under 2 million, like grew explosively fast. I think one of the reasons
so 200 to 2 million first year.
Yeah, I shouldn't take that much credit for it. It was more than that. You know what I did was Yelp. So nobody was paying attention to Yelp. People were still doing yellow pages. Like, it seems weird, but it's super true. Like, I remember going out with other contractors, and they were like, oh, man, I got the pages going. It's all about the first page. Like, what are you talking about? This is so weird to me. So I ended up buying every ad I could buy south of L.A. At Yelp. And I developed a relationship with a gal named Jennifer Gardner. She's now a VP there. And we created the disaster restoration category together. They didn't understand what it was. And so I met with Yelp in person to be like, this is what we are. We called it disaster restoration. And then as an extension, I was allowed to buy whatever I wanted. And so for years, I bought every single ad. Like, that's it. Like, I bought everything. I boxed everybody else out, and they let me do it.
Wow.
And so that was what really drove a lot of traffic to us. And so we grew that brand explosively fast. And that's when, you're having, it's like the best time of your life you never want to do again. Slinging DQs, air mover, staying up all night on commercial jobs, just the intensity. The phone rings at 2 a.m. and like, there was a time where I was like, really excited by that, before it got old. So, coming out of the 3-piece suit in the corner office into slinging DQs, like, it never bothered me at all from like an ego perspective. In fact, I felt it much more endearing. The problem with private equity is you're just moving around money, and we weren't doing many direct investments, although we had a direct investment arm. We were doing fund-to-fund work. So essentially, you're just moving money around to somebody else. It's just like
it's
zero.
A commodity. There's no
I just didn't feel like I was like tangibly adding to society. And then to do something as tangible as like restoring a property, and then all the way through into repair. I mean, within first year, we had our general contractor's license and really pushed into repair. But you're like, wow, I'm really impacting people's lives. And like, this is part of being a resilient economy. I took a certain amount of pride in that, I mean, people don't really give restoration contractors the credit they deserve in that they are the ones that run around and clean up, fix up, repair after major catastrophes. And without that, industries, whole economies can collapse at the governmental level. Like, we saw this with the Santa Rosa fire. Santa Rosa ripped through California. Folks were underinsured. They didn't have enough to restore their properties. And this became a problem at the governor level because that whole city essentially collapsed, like from a municipal bond perspective and the Melrose bonds for the schools. Restoration contractors help mitigate that bad outcome.
Mhm.
And that felt really good, being part of something that tangible. So after maybe 3 years, I became an Xactimate level 3. I don't know why. Don't really know.
Just
like,
what? I got obsessed with it, or?
I was nerding out on it. Came
Mhm.
pretty natural. So I stayed at the office, I think, Saturday and Sunday, and
Took
knocked
the
that
test
out.
with the curved staircase.
Uh-huh.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Was it the same one as recently?
I think it's probably significantly different. This is 27.5.
Oh, okay. So it was probably
Which
a
is
little different.
arguably one of the best versions, most
Yeah.
stable versions,
A lot of people
fastest
rave about it.
versions.
Yeah.
Yeah. 27.5, like SE. It had
Nice.
2 other letters behind it, but that was maybe
Mhm.
the best version of Xactimate until I think the recent X1 is better
Got it.
at this point. But we went through a wobbly time with
Mhm.
V28,
Yep.
as a lot of you guys know.
And the cloud and the online version,
Yeah, that
desktop
hybrid.
version, and yeah.
That transition to hybrid is messy. So I got the level 3 done. Then a guy named John Glissmeyer called me from Verisk, and
Mhm.
he's like, "Dude, you scored really well on this test." And I was like, "I did." I was all flattered.
Mhm.
He's like, "You should become a trainer." I was like, "I don't know why." And so for some reason, I felt like flattered and compelled. And so I went up there to Lehigh, and I did the train the trainer and became a trainer. And then I think on the flight back, I'm like, what the hell am I going to do with this? Like, I don't really want to be a teacher. And
Mhm.
those of you folks listening to this, like, know me at all. They don't have a tremendous amount of patience, and I can't suffer fools. And so it's like sometimes a lot when you're training somebody and you're like right click and they're like left click. And it's like, no, right click. No, click and drag.
Yep.
Like an elephant sitting on your index finger. Like, you got to hold it down and drag it. Right?
Yep. They still
And-
teach it that way.
Right? And so, like, that's a lot for
Yep.
me. But it was interesting. And my first class, for some reason, I've still, like, always used this as a data point. But my first class, I didn't know what I was doing. I had no reach, no actionable. Maybe 35 folks in there.
Wow.
Made over 20 grand
Wow.
in revenue. And what was that? That's like 2011, 2012, Alex. And there is no YouTube, right? Like,
Mhm.
Elena Wilson and Seth Harrison hadn't put all of that educational material out there for free.
Yep.
And so people would pay for it, right?
Yep.
And they were clamoring for that Xactimate training. So, I did that, had some interest, and like, well, what the heck did I do with this? And I was like, how do I solve a real problem? So the problem I had is we were doing preferred work for farmers, and
Mhm.
it kind of really cut my teeth
Mhm.
with farmers. I'm grateful for them for how they treated me at the outset of my career, which is something you don't hear very much in restores. But there was no TPA involved.
Yep.
There was no program guidelines. It was just
Mhm.
like they trusted us to do good work. We submitted our bill. I don't even remember anything getting rejected. Like, I'm sure it happened,
Yep.
but it just wasn't a big part of my life. Does that make
Mhm.
sense?
Yeah, yeah.
It's a wonderful relationship we had with them. But anyhow, the problem we were having was outside of farmers. I think it was like around, we were doing a lot of Liberty Safeco work,
Mhm.
and they liked us, but we were having trouble like figuring out what the hell they wanted from us.
Mhm.
And so I thought about, like, there's all these line items for a high grade shower surround, for example, but we couldn't figure out like what the ground truth was for what would be reasonable and customary.
Mhm.
So I just invited the Safeco Liberty Mutual adjusters. AAA came out like the first time that we did at Wawanisa.
Mhm.
And we got a group, maybe 8 adjusters and 30 restoration contractors that we knew
Mhm.
in the space. Put them in the warehouse. I remember being hot. We were like blowing axial air movers on everybody,
Mhm.
you know.
Keep everyone cool.
Get everyone
Yeah.
cool. Yeah, you got it. But that was the genesis for what you know to be actionable insights. Like the DNA goes back that far.
Wow.
We didn't form an entity until 2015, where
Mhm.
it became a 501c6 nonprofit.
Mhm.
And we did the nonprofit status for a really practical reason, is we wanted to appoint Peer and Allstate, NatGen to the board, and none of those executive general adjusters or national training managers were allowed to participate in a for-profit business while being a W-2 employee, but they could participate in a nonprofit.
That's
so I
smart.
structured the 501c6 around the ability for contractors, or really to carriers, to participate in the leadership, because I thought, if we want to create a standard of invoicing, which is really the natural outcome of like getting those folks together every month,
Yep.
it can't just be contractors that like say this is the line
Yep.
item.
Then it's skewed.
Of course.
It's not a standard.
So everything we've done, we've always like checked in with the board,
Mhm.
and it keeps you honest, because you
Mhm.
need that board participation for actionable brand promise to ring true.
Mhm.
But that's how you end up coming down the middle on things, because both sides of the claim
Hmm.
weighing in. So Actionable was a happy accident. I really can't say that I foresaw creating AI solutions and software through that entity, like back in 2015. Just like one thing led to another, but there was enough demand for it bubbling up that it was worth pursuing. So
where's Actionable today?
Actionable today is doing really well. It's probably the most exciting time to be part of Actionable right now. I'm the chairman of the board, and Seth Harrison is the executive director, essentially CEO of Actionable. Really capable gentleman, and he's doing a great job to run and grow the team.
That's awesome.
But essentially, Actionable wrote a 4,000-page book. Seth and I did in 2017, like when you started getting to know. That's what you're talking about, the Insight Sheet database, which is like 4,000 pages of invoicing guidelines to include that high-grade showers, right? And so we ended up taking all of those guidelines, and then working with Veris through a partnership that spanned the last 5 years to integrate those rules into what is now the Actionable profile. Or Exact Expert if you're running the rules at the instance level. And so now we're providing real-time guidance for restorers, IAs, and even some mutual carriers who use it.
That's awesome.
But that book is now expressed, through the software and provides like real-time training. And so that's a training that I'm passionate about. Like I'm not passionate about flying around and teaching people how to use a mouse.
Makes sense.
But the fact that every single day we're affecting tens of thousands of people. And even in the hundreds of thousands in some form. Their workflow and training and developing them, like that's work to be proud of, in my opinion. That's really scalable. So that's what I've been deeply passionate about. And so all along the way, while building, Actionable's maybe my most fun thing to work on. I talk about the vegetables, right? You got to eat your vegetables in the morning. And what'd you say, the chocolate? Actionable's my chocolate. Like I really love working on Actionable. It's very rewarding. And that nonprofit aspect, and like people will see and appreciate what you do and know that you're doing it seemingly for the right reasons. That brand seems to give back that way.
That's awesome. So for those listening that don't know, essentially Actionable has evolved into something you could plug into your Xactimate instance that gives you recommendations on your estimate based on the 4,000-page book that you talked about, which was formerly the Insights database. And, I mean, I think every restorer should be using it, right? Because
you can at least try it. It's free for the first month, so give it a shot. I think about it like Grammarly for writing an estimate.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. I think the restoration industry has a lot of awesome technical knowledge and such, but you don't propel the restoration industry forward necessarily by getting down in the nitty-gritty, right? The problems that you're talking about, it's a who, not how problem. Just go, get actionable insights, plug it in, now problem solved, right? But I want to zoom out a little bit because I think your story is compelling and like where it continued. So Actionable is live, everything's going great, right? Now clearly you're just chairman on the board of Actionable. What are you working on now? What other problems are you trying to solve within the space?
So one problem that has always bothered me, and it wasn't even so much as from a restorer. I mean, hell yeah, it did. I mean, remember the first claim at KIC, the mortgage company withheld the check, which was really frustrating. That was a big check to us at that time, right? But it was really born out of training at Actionable. We'd fly around, and one of my common questions I would ask is if you could change one thing about how ABC Restoration Company or ABC IA writes and processes claims, what would it be? And I think 20% of the time, the most common complaint was, well, I can't make my full bonus because the damn mortgage company is withholding my claims proceeds, and I need to get the company paid within 30 days to get my full bonus, and it keeps dragging out 60, 90 days. And my heart went out to them. Like, I had no answer. You imagine that as a trainer, you're like, that sounds terrible. And you're looking at the founder, and you're like, is this even fair? Right? Like, what are we doing here to this poor crew chief or project director as it be? I thought, this mortgage company problem, could this be solved? So I hired a summer intern named Gabe Matrone, and it was a research project. I had him research, like, why the hell is a mortgage company withholding the proceeds? Because I think probably like a lot of people listening to this right now.
Regulatory.
I think they think that the mortgage companies are holding onto the proceeds because it's investable and they want to hold onto the money. Because who wouldn't want to hold onto the money?
That is a common thing, which they also think that insurance companies hold on to the claims proceeds because it's investable money, which we talked about. That it's
non-investable.
not.
Once it's in reserves, it's non-investable. And for these mortgage companies, it's non-investable. Maybe not non-investable from a regulatory perspective, but non-investable from a perspective of the mortgage companies have enough complaints against them, like lawsuits, where it was very clear connection between the judge looking at the fact that they did invest the proceeds and then they didn't distribute it in a thoughtful or expedient way. And so the plaintiff won, right? The policyholder.
Wow.
And so mortgage companies generally will not invest those proceeds.
So time out. Mythbusters time. Basically, there's two common theories that I remember I thought as a contractor too. One, insurance company's not paying me. They want to pay me in 90 days because they want to make the extra interest on the money that they're holding.
Not true.
Not true, because they set a loss reserve when the time that happens in a loss, and then that money now gets blocked from the investments, right? And
it just gets moved out of the investment fund into the reserve account. And this is so standard in Poor's, Moody's, Fitch's. The rating agencies can actually rate the solvency, because after a big hurricane rips through, you need to know whether that carrier is solvent or not. And if they're if those funds are still in the investable assets, well, then it looks like an asset, but those assets aren't there anymore.
Interesting.
So it's trying to provide the street a pretty real-time insight. And if you don't pull adequate funds into reserves, then the insurance commissioner will fine you, or they'll preclude you from writing paper, meaning you can't write new policies. And so there's always that balance between the individual that is overseeing the investment fund and then the chief of claims. And there's tension there if you pull too much or too little into reserves.
And the same things at the mortgage company, where they can't necessarily take these lost draft checks and then invest them.
Yeah, it's very rare that happens. So
we have this unnecessarily painful process, but there's no ill intention. Like
it's not nefarious intent. It's just like shit rolls downhill, and the restorer is at the bottom of that hill. Or another way to think at it is there's a lot of straws in the milkshake, and like the last person who gets to hit the milkshake is the contractor, unfortunately.
So real quickly because I know exactly where I'm going to go with this, but so what does surety do, or what's the vision with surety, and what does surety specifically do then to solve that problem?
Surety is a banking portal of which carriers use to distribute claims proceeds, and in so doing, we underwrite the risk of double indemnity. Like, you first need to answer, like, why the hell is a mortgage company even on a claim check? And the answer is, if that property it has a mortgage, like 85% of the properties in the continental United States do, then really those insurance proceeds are owed to the first lien holder, which is the mortgage company. But the carriers recognize it creates a bad outcome, which is why all these carriers have these arbitrary thresholds. And so you were making me smart on the state of Illinois in that $40,000 or $50,000 is a threshold here.
Correct.
In my experience, is typically defined, or maybe absolutely, by the chief claims officer or the CFO of these insurance companies. But it's how much risk are they going to take? It's why $10,000 and below, no matter what it is, it rarely includes a lender. State Farm would be the example. They're at $5,000. But anything over $5,000, State Farm includes. Because if you read the letter of the law, not law, I shouldn't say that, the letter of the contract between the insured and the carrier, and then between the borrower and the mortgage lender, both infer that the claims proceeds, we at least need to observe the rights of the mortgage lender. And so if they don't observe those rights, they don't include the lender, and that policyholder takes that money and they don't restore the property, and say they foreclose on that property, the mortgage company does, and they find out they had a loss, then they go back to the carrier, and the carrier has to cut the check again. That's the double indemnity risk. So we underwrite that risk.
The mortgage company typically is an additional insured when you purchase the policy as well, right? Like a lot of times when you go through the mortgage process, they'll require you to put the mortgage company as an additional insured, right? Which gives them rights and protections under there also. But anyway.
Yeah, you got it. I mean, that's how they stay aware of what's going on with losses and so on. But, surety was the first one to come to the market and be like, okay, risk transfer, that's what this whole damn business is built on. Why don't we just underwrite the risk of double indemnity, and then we'll leverage geospatial data that our restorers will collect to substantiate the release of claims proceeds. So we don't have a fleet of inspectors they have to schedule with and meet you on site. It's just,
send me the Matterport.
Send me the Matterport. Okay, looks good. And then we'll release the funds to you. And so we do a tranched release, a third. We have ACH set up with all of our network contractors, and within 24 hours, we're releasing the first 33%. And then when they're 50% complete, they get another 33%. And then the last third is the one we care deeply about, making sure the policyholder is satisfied with the work. They have to sign off on a certificate of satisfaction.
Makes sense.
And restorer signs off on that. And all along, we collect the deductible for the restorer. And in so doing, we're circumnavigating the lender, which is our principal job to be done. But auxiliary, knowing my audience here, we also circumnavigate the policyholder. And I care deeply about the policyholder. It frames a lot of my decisions for what I build. However, many times policyholders will abuse the fact that the funds are flowing through them. And it might be scope creep, like, hey, I've got this money. If you want to get paid by Friday, I could make it happen. But you got to paint the kitchen for me, and it's like the kitchen wasn't even like relative to the loss, and there's scope creep, or they're always trying to get you to eat like some portion of the deductible.
Or help. I came, showed up, helped, did everything by the book, got the insurance company to agree on the price. Oh, I can't believe you charged $10,000 for that. Oh,
it's like they negotiated after the fact. You've seen it all, right?
That is so annoying. Or I had a client buy a brand new car with the contents money. Like, dude, that was for me to store and clean your content. No. You can keep the contents. I bought a $30,000 car. You don't understand. I've never been able to buy a car cash right off the lot. Like, but anyway, super cool.
So, yeah, we're just chipping away at solving this problem, but from first principles in a way I'm proud of. Maybe we're too principled. We make it a little harder on ourselves, but we have a solution that works and it's being used, and it's exciting. We have processed $20 million in claims proceeds to date, and we've proven out this thesis. Like, why does a carrier like want to do business with surety? It gets down to loss of use. Our position is that restorers are intentionally building slowly because they're being paid slowly. And if you can solve that problem, if you know the money is there and it's coming, then you don't have any issues with buying material, deploying labor, getting it done. And so that's the only thing I ask. I think everybody else who would sit down next to you and have a network, they would put pressure on their restorers relative to price and scope and the line items they could use and make them click buttons about when they did this or I don't care about any of that. I just want you to build fast, because all I've promised the carrier is that our restorers can build 33% faster if we pay them out ahead of them doing work,
which is huge, and it's true.
So for what does that mean for a carrier? Well, loss of use is huge, and it's a good lever that a restorer can actually pull outside of surety to help inspire the carrier to behave in a certain way. And this is especially true with commercial. Commercial is 55% of total indemnity, and commercial is loss of use, so what's called business interruption. And for residential, it's a little less. So it's ALE, additional living expense, and that's going to be around 28% of total indemnity, meaning a $100,000 claim, $28,000 is going to be going to a hotel and food for that particular policyholder, right? On average. So if you could constrain ALE by a third, essentially what you're doing, back of the napkin math, is you're reducing total overarching indemnity by 10%, which is flipping crazy. When I met with a major national carrier, explained that to a chief of claims, he almost got frustrated with me. He's like, that's ridiculous. If we'd have done that, we'd have saved $1 billion last year. I'm like, I don't know, Bill. Like, sign the contract. Like, what are we waiting for? But these are big numbers. Big numbers. So I don't know that surety's going to win, absolutely, Alex. It's a difficult build. It's the most difficult thing I've ever tried to build as an entrepreneur. I think you'd have to be foolishly optimistic to think that you could change how $110 billion a year flows in an industry that's 500 years old. But I happen to be that foolishly optimistic guy. But it's been humbling, throughout this road to realize how many incumbent players are really interested to keep things exactly the way they are. There's a lot of people that you and I run into at the higher level that are not really interested to solve the problem, because that change
100%.
might encumber their
They're nice and
ability
cozy.
to justify their existence.
Oh, yeah.
So there's all that, dude. But that's what we're chipping away at, man. And I think it's a model that people are borrowing from, will borrow from. Sure, you won't win it all, but we at least started a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
I'm deeply proud of mortgage lenders on claim checks creates bad outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody's got to deal with that.
That's awesome.
So that's what we've been up to of late. But, you know.
Super inspiring, and I'm super excited to see the outcome. I remember, I think, I don't know, 2020-ish, launched Albi, first time we talk, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we get together, and we've had this history of back and forth or whatever, but I was a rebel at heart,
you were fired up that day.
Oh man. And like, Whatley, like, I don't get it. Like, why are you going back to the insurance companies and doing all this shit? Like, man, do you not understand that the contractors, and you're a contractor and blah, blah, blah. And I remember bits and pieces of the conversation where you're like, dude, the only way to reduce claim friction where your words is for all of us to get along and stuff like that. I'm like, I don't know, man. Like, I was really fired up, and I'll be like totally transparent. Original part of my, I guess, upbringing within restoration was super anti-carrier, right?
Yeah.
I was the guy who thought that the insurance companies weren't paying because they were holding the funds and they were rolling around and these white collar guys and stuff like that, right? And then I had the opportunity to, like, through Albi, start interacting more, right? And obviously, I told you the story with meeting Aaron Brunko from Xactware. I became an Xactimate certified trainer, John Glissmeyer, Jason Love. And I realized that the opposite side of the industry, they're awesome, kind, loving people that are amazing. They just kind of have a little bit of a different lens. They're not these evil little devils. I know there's influencers out in the restoration industry being like, hey, don't give your ESX to the adjuster because they will do XYZ with it and blah, 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 and muddy scope it up and stuff like that. But hopefully I didn't give away who it was. But, like, they're genuinely awesome human beings. I just personally think they're kind of blind to maybe the fact that the contractor is the work of the contractor equals the claim. And they're probably a little bit too constrained by certain, legalities and board bureaucracies that exist in InsurTech that prevent them from really doing what's the best for everybody all the time, even though they're intense that way. I don't know if you'd agree or disagree, and I don't know where you see everything, but do you really think that the contractor's the bad guy, the insurance company's the bad guy? Is there a bad guy in this ecosystem? I mean...
You know what I remember having to overcome coming out of the 3-piece suit in private equity? I remember just people trusted me, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that was just implied. Young man wearing this fancy suit, walking into his fancy corner office. Trust was implied. It was just bestowed upon me. Didn't earn it.
Mm-hmm.
Then when I would walk into a policyholder's house, I felt that I needed to prove that I wasn't a crook or a criminal.
Ooh, yes.
Right? And you had to, like, transcend that, like, somehow. And there was, that rolling around the back of my head of, like, wow, people are treating me in a new and different way that I don't love. And that is the framework in our society that contractors can often be nefarious and bordering on criminal. And then, carriers, alternatively, how many billions of dollars are going to marketing to convince policyholders that you are in good hands or like a good neighbor every year?
Yep. And the illusion.
Yeah. It's entirely untrue. I don't want to say that it's entirely
It's not
untrue.
entirely untrue, but the illusion. Like, they don't tell you, hey, yeah, you have a fire at your house. Look, it's going to be the 6-month complicated process with all these materially interested parties, and we're going to do our best to try to facilitate everything, but blah, 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 blah. They paint the picture that, look, when the crazy squirrel comes and tears your shit up, boom.
That's right. But if
And
you and
that's
I
not
owned a
what it
carrier,
is.
we would probably do the same damn thing, so I can't hate on them for it.
Of course.
But, that is the overarching zeitgeist, and so you've got to transcend that as a restorer. And so if you think about that's true for a policyholder, if you're a staff adjuster, and the average tenure for a staff adjuster right now is 28 months in the industry, meaning high turn, right? And so you come in, you're new, who's training you? They already have those biases.
Yep.
Those biases get built into the training. Those biases get built into the cubicle talk.
Yep.
You wouldn't believe what this.
Yeah, especially if you're a staff adjuster making $50,000 a year and you see the contractor allegedly rolling around in, I don't know, millions of gross margin.
Maybe.
Little do you know that they're not actually taking that much money out of the business and taking it home, but there's that optics. Right?
Totally. And there's little things restorers do so wrong that make their life so hard on themselves. Like, don't show up to a job in a new $90,000 truck and then try to claim how broke you are to an adjuster who can't afford to pay attention. Like you said, making $55,000 a year, like that's a bad look. Another thing a lot of restorers do that drives me nuts. In our Actionable database, we have 28,000 contacts, as I was explaining to you earlier, and I had our business analyst pull a query recently for how many of those were Gmail, Yahoo, Juno accounts, right? 45% of the emails within the Actionable database are from a nondescript free account. And for Albi, right, does any of this ring true? I mean, do you see a lot of that
Some
with
of
the
it.
smaller
I mean,
end?
I would also, I kind of feel where you're going with this, because you have to keep in mind that even if I were to download something or sign up for something, I'd give you a BS email.
Well,
Right.
I think that there's certainly a kernel of truth to that. But what I believe to be true, and I have no way of proving this, is a lot of restorers are submitting, their $160,000 scope from a Gmail account, from a Yahoo account. And I think it makes it very easy for an adjuster to go, okay, either bottom of the pile, not a threat.
Yep.
And then they don't take you seriously, and they might beat you up more than they otherwise would. At KIC, we'd experienced a lot of luck fortuitously because my first 3 estimating hires were all attorneys. And so what I found during that time period is that attorneys were systemically underpaid, underemployed.
Ooh.
And so I was able to hire them on the cheap and bonus them out when they performed well. But we never, I don't remember arguing with adjuster being a big thing. And then sometimes you got to wonder, well, was that because each one of their last names had a comma ESQ behind it, and it was implied that maybe that was a pretty sophisticated shop who actually had a real email address, right? And I think restorers need to do a better job to own it and show up. If you want to be treated like a professional, you got to show up like a professional. And we don't always do that as restorers, and we make it easier for carriers to not take us seriously. So I hope the next generation of restorers starts to approach things in a more sophisticated way, and you're doing a lot to help create that reality.
Yeah, I remember one thing I learned from fundraising, dealing with investors and stuff like that, but our first conversation, we were at Knives, Restorer and me. I was at Knives, right? Internally.
You were intense.
Right?
I wasn't that bothered, but I was like, what do I do with this? He's so angry, and he's angry at the carrier. And you were frustrated with me for not being as angry. Yeah. You were like, I'm really angry. You should be angry too.
But here's the fundamental problem, right? Investing and dealing with investors. And again, I put investors and insurance companies in the same bucket. And, you previously in your 3-piece suit, what you probably understood, it's the concept of diplomacy, the concept of we could disagree, but we have to functionally work together because we're 2 materially interested parties in this, 4-party system, right? Insurance company, mortgage company, contractor, and policyholder. And if I come out at Knives with you, to you, what am I going to expect back? You know what I mean? Versus you're not there out to get me. You're there to do your job. You've got some guy breathing over your neck and stuff like that, and vice versa, right? I'm not screwing you over. I want to show you good faith as a contractor. And kind of toning that down a little bit, because I think the whole culture, and again, came from Rebels, came from the concept of man, I can't believe what insurance companies do. I still hope that we don't get the HMO of insurance we talked about. I still hope that Canada insurance market and Australia insurance market does not become the reality of the U.S. insurance market in the property space. And I know that if it happens, restorers will adapt, and I will be there to support restorers, and I'm still pro restorer, right? But I also think that we have to work together in the ecosystem. And I also think that you use the word nefariousness, right?
Yeah.
Nefariousness, nefarionity,
Nefarious. Just nefarious.
There's not as much of that from insurance carriers as we think. I think they're just, they're gullible
ignorant.
teddy bears, ignorant, sure,
Yeah.
I'll call that. But they're teddy bears that don't see the whole piece. When you're in a 3-piece suit as a chief, not to bash, like with all due respect, and again, when you say with all due respect, it then
Yeah.
But anyway,
It's
like
wait
as
till
a
he says
chief of
next.
freaking claims, like have you ever, shown up at 3:00 in the morning to see the sewer water in Mrs. Jones's basement? Do you like understand the concept that you can't pay a restorer enough to show up at 2:00 in the morning to take care of this policyholder? And by the way, where were you? Right? Because you had some $12 an hour unhelpful claims associate that was helping through the mayhem, right?
Yeah.
And but I don't think they're doing it on purpose. I just feel like they're ignorant to that because they never faced that. And we as restorers get hurt because we're so emotionally attached to what we do. We do this for a bigger reason, stuff like that. And we get hurt by certain systematic issues that happen, but they're not, Verisk isn't sitting and breathing down our necks as contractors and saying, oh, how do we take these guys down? In fact, I know from John Glissmeyer, they do so much for contractors, and they, welcomed both of us as Xactimate certified trainers and said, hey, yeah, teach your, people all this stuff. They're like, yeah, tell them about factoring. Yeah, tell them about pricing feedback, have them win the game. But obviously, no, tell them also that the carriers are our customers too, and we have PII, we have all these agreements. Our legal's breathing down our necks and stuff like that, but here's the playbook.
Something that you're doing in this conversation, I don't think you intentionally are doing it, but you're conflating carriers with Verisk. And to know Verisk well is to understand that we should really bifurcate. Verisk from
the reason I put them
carrier.
in the same bucket is because there's also that theory, and again, Mythbusters, but you'll see influencers out in the industry doing quote unquote due diligence on who owns Verisk and stuff like that, and going through and they just work for the carriers and so on and so forth, and they completely disregard the fact that Xactware was founded by a contractor, right? Completely throw that out.
James Loveland.
They completely disregard the fact that this former president of Xactware, I think president was his title, was a contractor.
Contractor.
Right?
Through and through.
And
still a contractor.
Yeah. And they disregard the fact that the current president of Xactware has a very pro-contractor approach and realizes certain things are flawed and is actively working to fix certain things.
No doubt. And the gentleman over the pricing department, Greg Pine, that gentleman is doing the very best he can to come down the middle, and that's what Verisk is attempting to do, just report on the news, not be the news.
Exactly.
And they think of themselves as a utility that they invest on behalf of their carrier and contractor clients. It would be false to assume that Verisk, at least as it relates to Property Estimating Solutions business unit, is generating the majority of its revenue from carriers. It's actually not even true. Yeah. So restorers matter to them. Yeah. And they recognize that they can only push so far before restorers just decide, I'm not using the solution. This creates zero good outcomes. Like, if you suppress the pricing in the extremes, then restorers eventually, CPA work or not, just would not use the program.
And there's already a segment of restorers that are not using the program, and they're billing out through, I have private coaching clients that's what they do. They bill through QuickBooks, they bill their price, they put together a price list and enter into contract with the homeowner and call it a day.
No doubt. And it can work okay. I've dabbled with it, to try to get away with Xactimate.
It works until a certain mass, and then once you get over 3 to 4 million, it doesn't work.
It doesn't work so hard.
But the part that's painful, like for restorers, and maybe we'll end with this, but I'm building a house, went into Xactimate, I'm an Xactimate certified trainer, put it all together, right? Wrote the whole sheet. I'm like, man, it's costing me more than what I wrote an Xactimate for to build this house. And again, I would consider myself close to an expert in Xactimate as an Xactimate certified trainer and stuff like that.
Better than average.
Better than average, at least. And I'm like, how did this work? And then I realized, and we were talking about it, like I feel like, we were talking about the fact that it's not a free market and, the concept of the pricing being a constraint. And I think like back in 2006 when my dad was a subcontractor, he was third in line and so many people made money. Like there was a PA who made 10%. Yeah. Then there was a GC who made 40%, and my dad was left with 50% of the job, and he would make 10 to 15% because he'd hire all these subs. Like people were rolling around in dough back then, right? In the recon side, at least. Well, and I don't know how much they took home, and I don't know all the dynamics, but like now it's almost flipped to the opposite side because the pricing has lagged. And obviously construction has gone up so much.
I don't think the pricing is lagged. I think the pricing is lagged relative to the added administrative burden that has been placed upon us. When I started out restoring, you didn't even need dry logs. Right? That
this is
exist.
huge. Yes.
And you didn't need to capture that space with a Matterport camera and assume the cost of that hardware or hosting or
Yep.
processing.
Yep.
You didn't have to go back and forth and adjust your scope. You know your average of scope right now in a full cycle claim that can be monitored through exact analysis. Its RCV, the replacement cost value, it's changing greater than 5%, 3.7 times. That means somebody's cracking that estimate open and making a material change to it. 3.7 times on average. I'm not talking about like giving a small tweak, like delete that line item and submit it, because we've all had that. Like, we don't pay for heavy blankets. Okay, Bill. Whatever, right? But it's a material change. That costs money. So what I think has gone on is that for every 100 employees that you and I have in the field, we need now 33 administrative people to help justify the bill. And that's what your dad didn't have. Your dad was just swinging hammers with his crew, right? And you weren't burdened with all these administrative costs. And these administrative folks are traditionally more expensive than our field folks. So 33 administrative folks might cost near as much as 100 field folks. That's why the pricing has lagged. And so when Actionable communicates to the pricing department, we help remind Verisk that, okay, this data might be accurate relative to what a drywaller would install that drywall for, or knock out the glue down flooring. But does that contemplate the additional administrative burden that has been placed on the restorer over the last 15 years? And I'm not sure that it does. And that's borne out through the fact that Verisk has numerous products, of which that are doing pretty damn well outside of even the property insurance ecosystem, using the same price list. And so if it's right for contractors that are not restorers, and that pricing is accurate, let's say,
then why
does that accuracy translate over here to the property insurance ecosystem when we're burdened? Like, I just had my HVAC I just had my AC unit and heat pump thing replaced at my house. He sends me this 1-page invoice, didn't line item anything out of the 14 lines.
Simple.
A price at the bottom. I paid my 30% before he showed up to the job. Then before he left, I paid the rest of it.
And out. Didn't need photos.
It was the guy who did the job,
Exactly.
did all that, right, administratively. He didn't need an army of people to justify his existence, and he was paid in real time.
No estimator, no project manager, none of that stuff.
And you're not playing the bank.
Exactly.
That costs money.
Yeah.
And so I think that's where the pricing, to the extent that it's lagged, I think that's where it's lagged. And that is a very difficult thing. If you and I were in Greg Pine's, what the hell do you do with that? Do you add 11% for the outsized administrative burden that carriers are placing on contractors? Is a difficult problem.
So I mean, the fundamental problem then boils down to the concept that less is more. And over the past decade, we've been chasing these margins, right? Deploying good money after bad money, in my opinion, because we've overcomplicated the entire process on all parties, right? Insurance companies like, hey, how can we, save more because of XYZ, or eliminate some fraud by standardizing the process and requiring all these dry logs and so on and so forth. In comes the ward laws and, of the world, who I heard theories that they come there and they say, hey, we'll adjust the claim and the delta, we'll do XYZ, or we get paid
That's
XY.
not a theory. It's on their website right now.
Okay. So they literally go in there and say, hey, if I save you 5,000,
that's right. And they participate in those economics.
So we added that complexity there. Now on the restoration contractor side, right, we're adding estimators, project managers, team coordinators to handle all this. And we've overcomplicated a simple economy that before, and actually rewind, back to the 1700s when the standard fire policy was a thing. It was one fucking sheet of paper that said, hey, woe is you, we pay you.
Yeah, we'll make you whole.
Right? And now we've got these policies that are 500 pages long with all these different exclusions, and we've got all these different hands in the cookie jar that obviously got to get paid. And it's this overcomplicated mess that really I don't think's doing much, because insurance premiums are going up and up.
But why
I don't
is
know
that?
if
Are they even
insurance-
profitable?
Well,
They're losing
that's
their
the thing.
ass.
Yeah.
And that's what restorers don't recognize. If you look at the loss ratios from AM Best, why do you think AIG and State Farm and Farmers and Nationwide and ServPro and Liberty to the best of their ability of pulling out of California? Why do you think that is? You think there's money to be made?
No.
Of course not. They're not making money.
The system's broken.
Yeah, it's totally broken. And so that's what's going to inspire a sea change. And the industry will arrive at a simpler solution that I've got some clarity. I don't know how comfortable I feel about speculating, but we can't keep going down this road of added complexity and administrative costs. And we're getting to a point where I think folks on both sides of the claim would be willing to come together. And can we get this thing close enough? I think that one way we've seen that expressed, like close enough, is through leveraging exterior digital assets for sketch. So think Eagle View, think Hover.
Yep.
You know, I've been a part of some audits of those digital assets. They can be off, like 5 squares off, like off. Maybe 15, 18% off. Nobody knows it, though. Nobody's getting on the roof to prove it, and they aren't being built with any particular bias. Like, I don't think Hover or Eagle View are intentionally rounding up or down. Yeah. They're unbiased third party, right? They're not vested in the economics of it. They're just doing their best.
It's not perfect.
But because on balance, between 100 claims, some are higher, some are lower, you find your balance. And I think I'll allude to the future that I believe we will realize in the next decade is something similar to that for claim settlement, where the various incumbent players will be able to deliver a digital asset that will relieve restorers and adjusters of the mundane, repetitive aspects of sketching and scoping. And then we can get back to maybe submitting small supplements for like known and provable deficiencies, but we can get that non-contested amount quickly, get to work, and now we're arguing, collaborating over maybe 15% of the job instead of 85% of the job or 100% of the job like we are currently, right? And so I'm excited about that future, and I intend to build towards that reality, and that's some of what we do with the Impartial brand.
Yeah, I also think like under the thesis of less is more, and if I was just a magical mediator in between this, I'd tell the insurance companies, stop overcomplicating, do what's right for the customer, for the policyholder. On the contractor side, though, I would say that my word of advice to them would be be grateful for the concept that, restoration companies from an EBITDA perspective are like awesome asset classes down. Like if you look at trucking, right, you're talking about 1% to 2% EBITDA and they're moving millions, right? So like having a restoration company that can do 10, 15, 20% EBITDA for those of you listening, let's just call it net profit, right, is huge, right? That means there's some stuff to work with. And think of all the inefficiencies that these companies have. So I think if there's a push within the restoration industry to become more efficient and then trade that additional efficiency, like let's say lock in my expectation as a restorer to 15 to 20% EBITDA, right? Trade the additional efficiency for faster claim payment and fairness on the insurance side. That's what I think the restorers need to do on their part. And then also like take advantage of all the one estimator with actionable insights and Matterport could be estimating 15 to 20 million. There's estimating services, concept. Stuff like that.
That didn't exist when you and I started.
Yeah,
you couldn't
100%.
do 15 million.
Yeah, and I think people need to gobble that up. Yeah. I think on the insurance carrier side, if I was that mediator in exchange, it's like stop scrutinizing, break down all these freaking barriers, right? Like one check, like now we got like a freaking desk adjuster, an office adjuster, and the ward laws of the world, and all these different freaking parties overcomplicating everything, right? It's like, what happened to the adjuster who could literally write the check?
Yeah, those days are gone.
Back in the day when you could like literally, and get you a check. Or then it evolved to get on site, but there's this draft department, whatever. I'll write in the letter for them to send you the check in the mail. I was cool with that too. Yeah. Fine. Have an auditor or whatever. But like now we have desk adjuster, monkey see, monkey do, writing an estimate for 40 grand, then office adjuster, cutting that down to 30. I've literally been in the courtroom where I could see the freaking audit trail, right? Because you can go into the Xactimate and see all the edits. And I saw the desk adjuster wrote it for 40, then somebody went in and cut it for 30, then it went back down to 20, then back up or whatever. Like you could see that happening in the back end, like you said, with those pricing changes. Yeah. And it's like all that just adds extra cost.
Absolutely. It doesn't add value to the policyholder. I think that's the most principled way to try to solve these problems is like what creates good outcomes for policyholders. Because at the end of the day,
100%.
We're all policyholders, and there's something so noble about the spirit of insurance.
Yeah.
And it should be preserved. And right now, it's unhealthy with what is going on in Louisiana, Colorado, Florida, California. These are unhealthy markets, and it bothers me deeply. I mean, Actionable's promise as a nonprofit is to preserve the health of the property insurance ecosystem, and I'm not sure we're doing our job because we get some very unhealthy markets. So I didn't ask the audience, like, manufacture some empathy for the other side of the claim, because they're taking big hits too. Climate change is real, and they failed to really contemplate that when they underwrote a lot of these policies a decade ago.
Yep.
And so that's coming to bear. And we really need to work together as an industry from both sides to like solve these problems, because we're definitely going down a road right now that's just not creating value.
Yep.
If you've got loss ratios being over 100%, meaning carriers are collecting $100 in premiums, they're paying out $110 in claims.
Yep.
That's a problem. That's not going to. You can't do that for more than 2 years and be solvent as a carrier. We don't need our carriers going insolvent.
Oh, yeah. We need carriers because they pay our work as contractors. And then carriers also, believe it or not, need contractors. Because imagine a world where there are no contractors, or, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like prices would just jack up with everything.
Yeah.
The third thing, though, is there's a community-based component to this that's more socioeconomic. Look at the areas that don't rebuild. Look at the communities that are not able to rebuild because of X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
How are those from a society standpoint? You know what I mean? Like, imagine if a hurricane hit the city's not able to rebuild.
Yeah.
What naturally happens to this broken city from a crime standpoint, from a, people suffering standpoint from all this? So, like, there's this third component. It's like an ethical component of what happens if we don't get along.
Right.
Like, literally, if you really magnify it and exponentially just let it decay, the world gets pretty fucked. Like, you would have these pockets of cities that nothing happens to or whatever, or pockets within cities that don't burn down or whatever, don't spread, don't whatever. And then you get these slums of rats and, burnt down houses that are about to fall down and, crime rating and stuff like that.
I'm not a huge fan of taking FEMA work. I think as a restorer, I took like 4 jobs, and I was like, all right, guys, never again. But FEMA does exist, from a federal perspective. They're essentially like the reinsurers of the industry in a way, at least to mitigate that bad outcome.
Yep.
So the feds have to step in and print money or do whatever the hell they do, but make sure that our societies are being rebuilt to some standard.
Yep.
And thank God that there's 50,000 restorers out there to get it done.
Yep.
When even FEMA comes around, somebody will pick up that work.
Yeah.
Something will get done. That's part of us being a resilient society.
Yep.
I think we need to get back to the spirit of
why
insurance. Like, why the hell does insurance even exist?
Yep.
It's like Farmer Bill looking out for Farmer Pete, and like, okay, if Pete's barn burns down, maybe we should all come together and help him out.
Yep.
And help rebuild that barn. And that's how these mutuals still exist today. And some of them are pretty damn innovative and actually gotten pretty big.
Yeah.
We've had fun selling into them at Surety.
Mm-hmm.
But mutuals still must have like 20% of the market within the United States. And I think those mutuals represent the spirit of actual insurance. Not regulated. Just a bunch of folks get by doing their thing. Sometimes the board is just made up of farmers and just policyholders, right? Those are really your owners. And that's the spirit of insurance. Insurance is a beautiful thing. It's just gotten bastardized along the way, and I intend to commit the rest of my career to solving some of these problems.
I'm the same.
Yeah.
We can't forget our roots, and we can't forget our why.
Yeah, I think it's incumbent upon us to do it.
Yeah.
So
excited to be building with you, man.
Yeah, likewise.
Bring it in, man.
Come into the real thing. All right, keep building, bro.
Cool.